I'm probably gonna wait for about 2 minutes after, and then I'll get started.
Sounds good.
Hey, Paul. Welcome on.
Hi, Steve.
Hi, Monica.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm well.
Good. Jake, I think you're fighting with your phone and your whole get up there. You're muted, so I can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Okay, yeah, I can barely hear you. I'm definitely fighting with my phone right now.
Okay. Can
So I'll see
everybody
what I
else?
can figure out.
Can everybody else hear me okay? Good. I think last time I had a little problem with a different headset, so hopefully this gets me through all right. So I know we're at 5:30. I'm going to wait about a minute and a half, and then I'm going to jump in and get started. Hey, Mark.
Steve, can you say something so I can check the volume on my end?
There you go. How's that? Can you hear me okay?
Barely. I might have to switch to my computer where I don't have a camera.
Okay.
I might do that real quick because I can't.
Well, I want to make sure, is everybody else hearing me okay? So it's not on my end.
I can hear you. I'm here
Okay.
for Porvy. Yep.
Okay. Is that you, Steve?
Yeah.
Okay. You just got the wrong name up there. That's all.
That's it. For
Yep.
me.
Yep. Oh, well. I'll probably be able to remember to call you Steve. Okay, I think I'm at 5:32. I got a lot that we need to get through. So if everybody's ready, we'll get started. I think, let's see, I know we've got a couple of people we still need to get joining us, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. If you don't mind turning your video on, then that's fine. If you just absolutely have some reason for not wanting to turn that video on, I guess we'll probably live with that too. So want to welcome everybody. Thanks again for taking time on your Tuesday evening. I appreciate that. I appreciate all of the comments I got, the drawing on maps, the ideas, the suggestions, all of that good stuff. I appreciate that coming across. I struggled a little bit with exactly how to put this together this evening to get as much as we could covered. This is our last meeting that we've got scheduled. If we're not able to get to where we need to be, then we'll have to talk about what we need to do. But I would like to fit within the meetings that you committed to and certainly respect that time. So that's why you saw me struggle with the agenda bit, probably send out a couple of confusing messages, and I apologize for that. Let me start out with, and you should have the single sheet agenda in front of you. Let me start out with some of the assumptions that I made. I think they're based on 2 meetings worth of conversations. So I think they're reasonably accurate. I think they're driven by consensus. I'm sure that everybody goes, that's exactly what I'm thinking, but I think that we agreed on a number of things. We agreed that separation is important, some kind of separation between off-leash dogs and others using the park. We talked a lot about that, and I think we reached that consensus. Secondly, I think we reached a consensus that said if we are going to designate those areas as off-leash, they need to be maintained, and we need to maybe think of some different ways to look at that than we have in the past. I know that the piece that came out from Parks and Rec talked about weekly and seasonal closures just for maintenance. I know that several of you talked about creative designs, amenities, different things like that. So I think that was another assumption that I'm making, that there needs to be some kind of creative work done with that. Timing, I know we've talked about scheduling. I saw that the timing that came across was really looking at a pretty good range. I propose that we look at 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. on timing. And then the last one I put up there was dogs are welcome at all parks, trails, open spaces, green belts. Some of those are going to need to be on a leash, and in others, they're going to have off-leash privileges. So those are kind of the assumptions I think I'm starting with. Any particular questions, concerns, anything we need to say about those before I keep going? Yeah, Steve?
Well, in regard to consensus, could you define, like, was it a vote, is it a majority, over half, or?
So that's always a tricky thing. We talked about that a little in the first meeting, and I know you weren't there because you were taking Porvy's place. For me, consensus is not the same as unanimity, and I typically try to avoid taking a vote. I'm looking for what the majority of folks are comfortable with. By that I mean, sometimes there's things that you can live with and you can be okay with, but they're not your most favorite. But you go, yeah, okay, in the interest of everybody, I can live with that. If I can get 80%, I'm feeling pretty good. I'm going to try to get more than that. The reason I don't go with unanimity is then it's too easy to just have, say, one person hold up the process and you can't move forward. So that's what I'm thinking about consensus. I know it's not an exact definition. If there's anybody that has, concerns or questions about how I'm making that determination or whether that's an accurate determination, that's an important thing for us as a group to address and to talk about.
Okay.
Okay.
Obviously, I have a concern, but
So concern about,
well, if we report to the city council that, this task force has a consensus, then, they should know that it's not unanimous at least.
I'm certainly more than happy and more than comfortable to explain to city council that, it's not unanimous.
Right.
But we were able to reach a significant consensus. I don't want to come to a decision with, 55% of you going, yeah, I'm good with it, and 45% of you saying no. That's not enough for us to move forward. I have to have a pretty solid consensus to move forward.
Okay. And you're representing the task force, not the greater, citizens of Englewood.
Correct.
When you report. Okay.
Correct. And the other thing is, I will run a draft back by all of you. I'll say this now, and I'll remind you again. I will run a draft by you because I don't want there to be any, significant or glaring errors on my part. And I'll give you some time to get back to me, and we can have discussions around any parts of that we need to. I'm also going to remind you that draft, when it comes out the first time, has got to be confidential because it's a working document. I don't know that I got it right. I may have misstated something, and I just don't think it's fair for any of us if that just, goes out to the general population. That needs to be confidential. It'll come back to me. I'll make what adjustments I need to, and that document then is something that is, you can share, you can do what you want with. Fair enough? Okay, let's jump in.
Steve,
Yeah.
I had a point just to
Paul, yes.
Just to tack on to what Steve was talking about. Realize too that Steve and I don't represent the gamut of opinion that runs through all the off-leash park users. I've been talking about it with many of the people in the last week. I've hope this is okay. I've been talking with many of the off-leash park users about the new plan that Parks and Rec put out last week about what was in that, just to see what people were thinking about that. And I got a range of opinions back. There may be something, there may be a plan that I can live with, and it may be different than what Steve can live with, and it may be different from what 50 other people can live with, but it's not going to, whatever comes out of this meeting, whatever goes to council, I still have a feeling that whenever it's on the council docket for whatever night it is, you're still going to have a large number of off-leash users. You're gonna have a large number of off-leash users calling in to that meeting, giving their 2, 5, 10 cents worth. So, I guess I'm just trying to get to, I'm just trying to say that we don't, whatever Steve and and in terms of representing park users, we represent back to them too, not just from them. So
Sure. I appreciate that. And I think that's what we want you to do is represent the voices that you're hearing. I absolutely understand that there is no way that we're going to come up with a plan that everybody in Englewood says, whoa, that's wonderful, that's great. There's going to be people on both sides of the spectrum who like it, dislike it for a number of different reasons. I am hoping that this group, and we have a range of representation on this group, I'm hoping that this group can help us get as close as we can to a good plan, a reasonable plan that, everybody has a little bit of give and take with that. And if we can get as close as possible, that will enable council then to make a good decision. So I think that's what we're tasked with. Okay. I'm going to, and I would say that I received feedback just from the folks that are on this group. And, there's a number of different opinions running around just from the folks that are on this screen. So I understand that. I think a place to start, at least for me to help organize it in my mind, is kind of piggybacking off of what the work that Parks and Rec put into that document that they sent to me and I sent out to you. The suggestion, and again, I would say it kind of goes consistent with some of the presumptions that I listed a minute or two ago. There would be a fenced area for off-leash use at Canine Park, a fenced area for off-leash use at Cushing Park. Same thing at Jason. Emerson would be unfenced. Northwest Greenbelt would be unfenced. And Rotello Park, and I got different feedbacks even from this group. There was an unfenced and a fenced component of that. And so I want to take some time to talk our way through that. I think the intent, and if you go to the document that the Parks provided, this creates, and I don't know whether the correct term would be significantly more, but it does create more area for off-leash, and it creates a wider hour range for off-leash. It also addresses some of the separation issues and maintenance issues that we talked about. So that, I think, is kind of the off-leash location package that's proposed. And if it's okay with you guys, I think maybe the best way to start moving through that is just to move down through the parks that I have listed and see if there's concerns or questions. You have the document in front of you. You can see what the graphic part looks like. And if that's the way we can go, then let's do that. I don't know that there's a lot of discussion around Canine Corral. It's already fenced. It is what it is. There may be some opportunity for amenities. There may be opportunity for some different things there. But at this point, let me just ask: is there discussion? Are there concerns? Are there opportunities that any of you want to speak to around Canine Corral? Okay. What about Cushing Park? You've got a picture of that. You've got what that looks like. If you want to bring that up and take a look at it, or whatever would be most helpful to look at that. Concerns, comments, questions about Cushing Park?
Hey, Steve, it's David Lewis.
Yes, Dave.
I apologize. I just got back from vacation. I'm not able to share my screen or use my screen for video, but is it possible, maybe it's easier for everyone if you can share your screen with the documents? Is that possible?
Oh, sure. I think I can. I think I can do that. I'm not going to be able, if I share my screen, it's going to be really tough for me to tell when you go off and on mute. And it's going to be really tough for me to tell if you raise your hand. So if you guys can kind of help me through the discussion part of that would be great. So let me pop my screen up here.
Hey, Steve, do you want Debbie to share the document? Would that be easier so you can still see the group?
Well, let me ask. I've got the group off to the side, but I can only see 4. So if Debbie shares a screen, I think we're going to see the screen, and we're still going to have people off to the side. So does this work looking at it like this? Can you guys see this? Hearing nobody say no, then let me start there. So this is what Parks has kind of suggested. You've got the soccer, the playground, basketball court, parking lot, and then you've got the dog park here. I would suggest that when we're looking at the map like this, it may not be, exactly a little square like that. There may be, some ways to be a bit more creative in the design of that. But as far as location goes, that's the concept behind the location. If you look down here, you'll see some of the annotated notes. The park gets developed. There'll be about an acre for a dog park on the northwest corner. There'll be 1 or 2 times a week for 3 or 4 hours when it's closed for more mowing, irrigation, maintenance. And then there'll be 3 or 4 weeks where it's closed for seeding and deep watering, fertilization. That's kind of what I think we say about Cushing Park. So let me just open it up for comments or thoughts. Mark, I see, hey, it does show me when you raise your hand, I can see that. So yeah, Mark, jump in.
Yeah, sure, thanks. Yeah, I'm sorry, did I walk on you, Martha?
Go ahead, Mark.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've long supported this. It's on the books. I think that this is something that the city should pursue. I think that it is, should be part of any mix of other proposals that go to council. And to be honest, I think of this as being something that I would encourage the commission to recommend this as a priority, regardless of what else moves to council. So this is a great idea. It's effectively has a certain degree of approval already, and I think we should all try to get behind it.
Okay, thanks, Martha.
I agree with Mark. I think that's excellent because you have the dog park across the street. You're not bothering anybody else in the park. I think that's an excellent place for them to be, for everyone.
Okay. Either put your hand up or jump in if you've got something else any other comments, concerns, anything you want to say?
I would just also like to say this. I mean, obviously the commission, we've talked about this a lot. So I hope that I don't ruin this, but one of my questions that I have, because it's been discussed a lot as a request that people liked, was the idea of a small dog park. Is this maybe something that we would make for small dogs only, or we would do all size of dogs here? And maybe then, Jason Park, I think would be all size dogs. So I can say that earlier, but maybe this is the small dog park for the people that like that. Just throwing it out there.
Okay. I don't know if anybody from Parks and Rec has sort of thought about, are we designating a park separate for small dogs? If so, have you thought about where that might be? Or is that still down the road in sort of planning and thinking? Christina?
Steve, so yeah, that'd be part of this planning process. Nothing's been designated yet as small or large or fenced or non-fenced. So that would be up for discussion if this would be a small dog park, but I have heard that before from council and others that have discussed Cushing Park as becoming a dog park.
Okay, Mark?
My thought about this, and if the folks that in the department think this is wrong, then please correct me. But this appears to be one of those larger park areas with actually a fairly good amount of space to create a larger enclosure. And I think that the idea of creating small enclosures for small dogs only is a really cool idea that could work very well as part of a system. But I would probably think to look for some of the smaller units where there just isn't enough, the smaller individual parks where there just isn't enough space to carve out something like a full acre. That would just be my thought. Although I know I'm getting a little bit far down the track on this particular.
Well, I'm taking notes on it because I think it's always helpful if we've got some of those ideas out there. Steve,
and how about if you?
Let me go to Steve and let me go to Alan after Steve.
Well, a question I had is, where the dog park is designated on here, is this whole area going to be fenced? And is the area along Little Dry Creek heading south, is that part of the park?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that area where it's marked dog park, the goal would be to fence as much as that area as possible in. And then where the creek actually is would not be part of it. It would stop at the sidewalk.
Okay. Yeah, concern would certainly be fencing. I think the rail's on the west side there, so I would bet there's a fence. But Dartmouth is busy. And I don't know, if you start segregating, fences, fenced in areas within fenced in areas, I don't know if that's going to be all that appealing. I just don't know of the occurrences of problems with big dogs and little dogs at least in terms of documentation, that would, warrant fencing off an area in a potentially fenced off area.
And I'm wondering I think to that, Steve, if there's a way for us to be a bit more creative so we don't have like a box within a box. I wouldn't think that's what we're thinking. I think we have a better creative design to that. Let me go to Alan, and then Dave, you've got your hand up.
Hey, I was just thinking about the big dog, little dog park, and I really didn't realize that. But if you fence off that amount, not in that rectangle section, but make it either right side, left side, little dog, big dog, or little dog and big dog. So sometimes you want your little dog to go play with the big dogs. I don't know if you split that off or not, or even right before that, in between Inca and the dog park, there might be a spot for little dogs only. You might not need a full acre for those, whereas you need a bigger acre for large dogs. That was all I had to say.
Okay, good. Dave?
That area that you're looking at between Little Dry Creek Trail to the south that's labeled there, and then if you look to the north where the white box touches the other sidewalk over to where the light rail is about an acre. Once you start putting fences inside of fences, it becomes inherently more difficult for park staff to maintain turf. The smaller the area, the higher the traffic density, the more difficult it becomes. So I would just caution everybody to be careful what you're wishing for, because if we can't maintain it, it's going to end up being dirt or chips, wood chips.
Good point. And I want to hear about all of these things, but I know we're not going to get the parks designed tonight. That's not what we're going to do, but it is helpful to hear some of those ideas. Anything else we need to say about Cushing, or are we kind of good? Is your hand up, Steve?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Just a general statement. Has anyone from parks or this committee talked to any dog experts or trainers about, what is ideal in sizes, to facilitate, best use for dogs in terms of exercise based on, the population, or the dog traffic in the parks. Does that come into play? I think it should.
I think it should. I will certainly put a note and follow up on that. You're right. Somebody, I'm sure, has figured these things out. So I'll put a note and we'll manage that. Anything else on Cushing? Okay, I'm going to move forward. The next park that I've got is Jason Park. So let me get can you see the screen okay? So what we've got in Jason Park is the soccer field, the T-ball, shelter, and then a fully fenced dog park down at the bottom. Let me look down here. It's a fully fenced acre south of the basketball. Again, you've got the weekly and seasonal closures to maintain it. And we've got potable water for dogs and for humans, shade trees. Picnic tables will be included. So we'll have some amenities around that. I'm sure those are pieces we'll continue to look at and think about. Jake, you got your hand up.
Yeah, hi. I was trying to raise my hand for the Cushing thing, and then I finally figured out how to do it digitally. So we'll see if I can figure out how to unraise my hand. Anyway,
there you go.
Oh, there you go. Okay, thank you. Yeah, just around Cushing, I just wanted to throw my support behind the general idea. I don't know about the minutia, but
okay.
Yeah, as far as Jason Park, I think it's a good idea. I would just point out I do think it's a big concession. I think sometimes there's a feeling that a lot is being taken from the off-leash side, but with the Jason Park fence, but it is exclusive off-leash. There's really no other use for that area at that point, and it would cut down on the conflict, which I definitely think benefits off-leash users. It just makes the park more pleasant for everybody. So that's all.
Okay. Steve?
Well, under that scenario in the map, you know, the off-leash users are going to lose 88% of the space for the park. It's a very high traffic area, as you may know. I'm not sure if you've ever been to Jason Park and seen the, you know, the traffic that's there during the off-leash times. And again, what is the problem? There's really no documented conflicts. You know, soccer fields are, when they're in use, there's not supposed to be dogs there, you know? And if it's not, then it's a matter of communication to get dog users away from there. But to give away, you know, almost 90% of the park seems way overdone. And as Jake said, you know, a couple of weeks ago, it is a gem of the Englewood Park system. And, you know, just saying there's conflicts when, you know, there are people that don't like, you know, that don't want to be around dogs, but that doesn't mean that dogs and dog owners then need to be relegated to, you know, this one little area.
Okay. Dave, you had your hand up.
So I totally hear what was just said about this scenario, and that it feels like, and I'm hearing that you're saying it feels like something's being taken away from an enforcement standpoint and from a general use. I look at this as a huge win for dog owners, from the standpoint that you're having a very large designated area for use, and you're greatly expanding the hours of that use, making it more convenient for the community to use. We wouldn't have those restrictions of on-leash, off-leash hours. It's going to make it easier for code enforcement, animal welfare, and the park ranger to do enforcement, because there is a specific use area. I have to say, Jason Park is the one that we get the most emails about, and I think council has heard the most concerns about. I really think this is a great compromise, and it's really giving back to the community where it's a win-win for everyone involved, especially with expanding those hours. You have to admit, giving hours to the full opening of the park is a tremendous win for dog users.
Okay, I've got Paul and then I've got Mark. You're on mute. You're on mute, Paul.
I had a couple of questions. So let's assume for a minute that Jason Park goes through as it's laid out. I'm wondering would plans for fencing, would plans for putting up the fence go pretty quickly? Is that something that would happen in the next calendar year? And would the regulations of not having dogs off leash wait until there was the fence? Would, you know, how would that, you know, would you even if the fence wasn't up, would you still not let off leash dogs in Jason Park? You know, how does the timing work on that? I guess that's my question there. And yeah.
So let me turn to somebody from Parks and talk to me about timing. Christina?
Yep, sure. So most likely, whatever we get from these discussions and plans that are put in place, it's going to be a phased approach. Jason Park is set to be renovated next year. We have phase 2 coming into play next year, and Cushing is in the same boat. We did receive some funds from council to do renovations, and Dave Lee, our open space manager, received a grant for Jason Parks. We have some matching funds to do some work. We can add the dog park into that. It won't happen the 1st of January. It would happen sometime in the spring to summer. So the recommendation would be this whole program is going to be phased in as the ranger comes on board. And that would be something we publicize so people understood. And most likely council is going to want to leave the current program in place until the fence parks are open and ready for use. And that would be something we would announce as progress is being made.
Okay, let me
Yeah,
go
but
to,
Steve, if I can jump in there real
Sure.
quick, I just need to correct something.
Mhm.
We have not received any kind of grant funds. We are applying for them next year. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands anything that's done to that park, capital wise, is going to have to be contingent upon us receiving grant funds from Arapahoe County. And that won't be announced until August of 2021.
okay, okay. And let me go to Mark and then let me go to Steve.
Yeah, well, I think most of these things are covered. I just want to voice support for this idea. I think that it is a straightforward solution to the problems that we know exist in Jason Park, and I think it's a great idea. I also certainly agree that it would be appropriate to allow for continued off-leash use in this area until that facility is opened. So that's really it. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Steve?
Well, in response to what Dave said, I would venture that there would be not one off-leash dog user at that park that would say this is a great thing for them. And again, problems at the park, they may be perceived problems. You know, people that don't want to be in a park where there's an off-leash dog say it's a problem, but that doesn't make fact that there are problems.
So I don't know how to best address that, because the issue's come up a number of times. We've heard folks in this group very specifically describe problems that they had or that they were involved in. I read through the report that went to council. There were very specific emails that came from, I think, a significant number of people that described problems that they had encountered, not necessarily just in Jason, but in parks where off-leash dogs and individuals using the park for either sports or for their own family use or for just their own individual use had encountered, problems. And so I mean, when you say there's not evidence, I'm sure there's not, pictures and all of that, but
No reports. There's no reports.
Well, I saw emails and I saw folks on this group say very specifically that they had encountered it on a personal level. So, I don't know how to draw that line. I'm the guy in the middle. I'm not trying to argue for it one way or the other, but I know this keeps coming up, and I know that there's a body of information that I read and that I heard that would say otherwise.
Okay, well, as far as the body of information, if it's, what I know a couple of weeks ago, Jake, or in some documentation, it was stated that city council was inundated with speakers talking about the problems with the parks. I know at that meeting, the pro off-leash people did not sign up to speak because that issue was not on the agenda. So out of respect for the city council, we just held off. So, I mean, it ended up being a situation where we didn't get to respond.
Mm-hmm. And I guess my hope is, out of this group, my hope is we can reach some kind of a consensus, and maybe there's some trade-offs in that consensus that says, yeah, this is not maybe your best and favorite first choice, but when we put the package together, is there a way to make that package acceptable? And we're only partway through the package. So I understand, Steve, at least your concern, and I'm happy to come back and revisit it. If there's anything else we need to say about Jason, let's say it. And then I'm going to move down through the rest of the parks, and then we'll look at the whole package.
This is Alan. I just wanted to mention, I was pretty impressed with how big that fully fenced dog park will be, an actual acre to have those dogs there. and how you have it laid out is perfect. And I know that you'll probably get more field usage out of that if we have that dog park. So kudos to whoever set that up. I just want to let you know where I'm really impressed with that setup.
Okay, thanks. Anything else? Okay, I'm going to roll on. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would just like to say that, you know, for Englewood Unleashed, I think this is a big compromise. You know, they get a lot, they get one side of the park, and plus they're going to have Cushion Park. So, you know, and they're both going to be unleashed in unlimited hours. So I think that's a great compromise for them.
I'd rather have the other side of the park.
I'm sure you would. I would like to have the whole park, but you know
And you
what?
can't fit a full-size soccer field on that little park over there.
That's true, but you know, for 17 years there has been, you know, a cooperative effort, you know, with Pirate Youth Sports and the off leash to make it work, and we'd love that to continue.
Okay, I'm going to roll on down. I'm going to move to Emerson, and if I read this right, Emerson is proposed to be completely off leash. That's what I've got? Comments, thoughts? Let's see what it says down here. Let me see what. Not enclosed, 1 acre, off leash, 6 to 11. Again, the same weekly closures for maintenance to make sure that we keep everything alive and growing. That's about what that says under there. So I'm open for comments. I've got Jake, you got your hand up, and then Paul.
Yeah, so generally, I think the unfenced thing is a really bad idea, but I would be okay with it as long as the people living adjacent to the park were very, very heavily involved. There's only, it's hard to see here, like 12 or so houses or something. I know two people who live adjacent to Emerson Park called in to council on July 6th and said they did not want an unfenced dog park there. So like generally, I think the unfenced parks are a bad idea, but I just think if the neighbors are okay with it, I'd be okay with it. I think they should be very involved. The only reason I say that is there's no playground or anything, so there's no facilities. So I mean, if the neighbors are okay with it, I think that's what really matters. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, and I was going to add that yeah, I was kind of surprised, similar to Jake, that with the comments that were made during the council meeting in July, that there's not even a fence on the alley side, on the west side. Even if it's not I mean, there's, you know, I don't know that it would need to be a full enclosure, but I think just for purposes of separating the dogs from the alley traffic, running into driveways and backyards and open gates and things like that would be something that we probably want to at least think about, you know.
Okay.
So, and I guess another question I had is, with all of this fencing, when we talk about a fence, what exactly are we talking about? I mean, I know I actually went over to Cushing Park and took a look around there, and I noticed around the playground over there, there's like a three-foot chain link fence, but it's painted black. I mean, it's wearing now, you know, and I thought, you know, maybe like a chain link fence that's, you know, a 3 foot or so chain link fence that's painted black or maybe green like they do now, you know, on the west side of this park wouldn't be out of line.
Okay, I know, Monica, you've got your hand up, but let me ask Christina or Dave, have you guys looked at fences? What are we looking at when it comes to that?
We're looking at a short 3 to 4 foot, probably 3.5 we'll settle on foot fence, not your chain link. It'll come down to cost too and how much we're actually putting up, but there's a lot of good decorative type options that will fit the need for a fenced area. Now along the alley, it may be different. So that's something we look into. Nothing has been set as far as what we're going to go with, but we would agree with you that a chain link fence for the dog park, it's just that silver is probably not the best option as of right now.
Okay, thanks. Monica.
I would venture to guess that there's probably a handful of people at that park right now with their dogs off leash. It's that time of day. And if you advertise it as an off leash area that's not fenced in, that's when you're going to have issues with, because right now it's like a kind of a known quantity of the dogs that are there. But you have to be prepared for other dogs coming into the area. Naturally, that's actually a pretty wonderful spot for an off-leash area because all of those houses on the alley side are fenced. And on the east side of that, you just have a couple front yards. I feel like because there's so little traffic in that area at all times of the day, maybe something more aesthetically pleasing, like a nice split rail or something might suffice, just because of the surrounding area is it's pretty isolated. And then that's all I wanted to say about that. It just seems like a really prime spot to have a more open off-leash area. And I haven't jumped in the conversation yet, but I know that the designated dog spaces in the other places are small, especially when you're used to having a soccer field size space. But it just, it really, I think they're well thought out, and I think I just think that it will work. So that's just my 2 cents. All right, thanks.
Okay, thanks. Kate, you got your hand up.
So I was glad that this stuck around because this is one of those requests that the original subcommittee honored, only because we've had so many people come to our city council I'm not on city council, our commission meetings like so often to say that they would like this to be off leash. So for me, I like the idea of not fencing this. I live really close by. I think that Monica's right. You walk by and it's just this really kind of cute little breath of fresh air, like within the houses. So the idea of putting fences around it, I think would really ruin the aesthetics of this park. I think that I personally do have concerns with turning this into off leash if there would be a flood of people in that area. However, we've talked to the people that come to commission meeting multiple times that if we do this, that everyone is allowed there now. So you guys have to be prepared that it might not be your little park anymore. And they said that they're okay with it. So I really support this, and I think that we should stick with it and not fence it personally.
Okay, thanks. Anything else we need to say about Emerson?
This is Alan, and I just want to let you know, I live a couple blocks away, and every time I walk by, there's always dogs off leash, and I've, and it's never been a problem. And I love that little park. It is enclosed in a little private area, but I think that'd be a great place for an off-leash dog area.
Okay, great. Okay, I'm going to roll past Emerson.
Do you see me, Steve?
There we go. I didn't see that. Yep, I see you. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's okay. With Emerson, in one sense, there should be no off-leash member of this task force that would be against an off-leash area. Sure, that would be fine. Just for safety of the animals, a fence probably wouldn't be bad. I'm hearing that it's not a very, a lot of traffic, but dogs, if it's going to be a congested area and dogs are chasing each other, a lot of dogs just want to get away. So it could create problems. But just the logic, though, it's okay not, to not have separation. I heard in the last meeting, a consensus was we need to separate, you know, humans and dogs, and here it's okay. If it's okay here, it should be okay at Jason.
Okay. Mark? Mark, you got your hand up. Did you mean to put
Yeah,
it
I just
up?
wanted to respond to that a little bit. You know, the original recommendation that we put together was certainly about separation, but it wasn't just about separation from all people. It was, you know, we said, let's focus on a few factors that seem to be associated with most of the complaints and incidents that come up. And those were sports, playgrounds, and rented pavilions. And so, you know, one of the reasons why this was on the list, even though I've always been open that I think that the long-term future is going to be, you know, fenced enclosures and a system of them. But one of the reasons why we felt comfortable with the idea of proposing this was that it didn't involve any of those three factors. So I think thinking about, you know, bits of fence, if it protects dogs. I mean, I know that area as well, and I don't live over there anymore, but I did at one time, and it is, you know, because the streets don't go through, there's not a lot of vehicles around there. It's pretty quiet, but you know, if there's a concern about dogs getting in the street, you know, maybe that warrants looking at some kind of barrier, you know, for the animal safety. But there is not that mix of incompatible uses, you know, with rented sports fields, rented pavilions, and playgrounds that the city has built for the use of small children. So that's one of the main differences in this case, you know, between compared to say Duncan and Jason, so on.
Okay, Monica, you had your hand up, and then Steve, I see you've got yours up.
I just wanted to agree with Mark on that. And when I say very little traffic, there's very little traffic on that street. Like during rush hour, like when all the parents are coming home from work and stuff, you might see one car, and if you're there for an hour. So
Okay,
I do think you're right. If other dogs are coming in from an unknown people that aren't familiar with the area, I think it could almost be a wait and see project and see like, well, how many more people are coming to this little nook and cranny of our neighborhood, you know, before we fence it all off. But, and it's not a mixed use. I've never seen that park be used for anything but a dog park. So.
okay. I'm going to leave the fence and I'm going to set it kind of aside, and we can see where that part of the conversation goes. Let's not worry about trying to come to a final decision on the fence. Steve?
Yeah, well, if there was a fence that separated the playground and pavilion area at Jason Park, that would take two out of the three issues, quote unquote, off the table. There would only be the shared Pirates youth sports with the off leash. We would love to have the area closed during youth events. There's a gentleman, his name was up on the top of the page, John, at Jason Park. He told me that, you know, when there's no youth sport activities other than dogs, the park is empty. So, you know, we don't want to turn that space into just, you know, dead space or unused space. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. I'm going to move on past Emerson. I think we've kind of got a consensus on that. So let me move past that and let me go down to the Greenbelt. What do we have here? Not fenced. It's almost 11 acres. Again, it's open from 6 to 11 every day. Again, you've got your closures. Dogs would stay out of the playground area, so that would be closed off to dogs. There'd be seasonal irrigation, short term. So that's kind of what we're looking on the Northwest Greenbelt. Thoughts, questions?
This is Alan.
Okay, you got Alan and then Jake.
Okay, sorry, I don't know if you can see my hand raising up, but the playground, would that be fenced off since there's a playground there, or it'd be just say, you know, stay out of the playground?
Christina, or Dave, you're gonna have to help me out with that.
My preference would be not to fence it. It's not that whole area in the box. It's the corner of the upper right corner of that box. It's a very small area. I would sign it and see if that works first and people are respectful of that, and put a fence up as a last resort.
Okay,
Thanks, Dave.
thanks, Jake.
Thanks. So yeah, I just think as a principle, the unfenced dog park with facilities, especially playgrounds, is a bad idea. I mean, we all know dogs are going to be on the playground. I think it's kind of disingenuous to pretend otherwise. It's just we have 17 years of history to know that's going to happen. But if something has to if there has to be like an unleashed park with facilities, I mean, I would prefer leaving one as it is to designating a new one. And I think if we need more concessions, I think there's a lot of fencing options we haven't looked at. Like, for example, I think, I mean, I don't know if it's appropriate to give examples of my thoughts throwing this in there, but like the Panhandle at Bates Logan Park, I think is an option, especially for the north side of Englewood. Romans, I think, has room for a park, for a fenced area. I just think on principle, I mean, we've had the code enforcement supervisor tell us that kids have been bit in our unleashed parks, and that what did he say, that dogs see kids as squeaky toys, and I just don't think it's wise for the city to be like encouraging that kind of thing anymore. So that's
Okay. Okay, fair enough. I made that note. Any other comments about the Northwest Greenbelt? Okay, I'm gonna roll on. So there, I guess, is the zoomed in version of that a bit. And let's go to Rotello. Looks like it's not fenced. It's 3 acres, off-leash park, open from 6 to 11. Dogs to stay out of playground and shelter area. The athletic programming would go away, and then you'd have your weekly closures, your seasonal closures to just make sure that it's maintained. So let me ask the question we just were in the midst of talking about. Christina or Dave, does that mean the playground, is there a fence that goes somewhere through here? How do we manage the intersection of dogs off leash and playground?
Steve, what you're seeing there doesn't show the topography of the area. And the area where the off-leash is down in a drainage basin, a detention pond.
Mm-hmm.
So everything else is above that, including the playground itself. So the off-leash area is down below, probably in a 10-foot detention pond, which kind of gives it a natural barrier there. I also want to make note that we cannot put fencing in there because of the detention pond and the flooding propensity in that area when we have spring storms.
Okay. Okay, so, and if I remember right, this is pretty close to Jason, right?
Correct.
And
Steve,
I think somewhere I read the intent was that this would also provide some of that area. I think, Steve, you were saying you know, the 80% you were talking about not being able to use in Jason. I think the intent was that part of that could shift here. So let's talk about that. I know Martha and then Jake.
Yeah, Steve, what I like to say is like having Rotolo and Jason as off leash for our community here is not right. We need to have one park without the dogs. I'm good with having Jason, have a fence on it. And in Rotolo, no dogs, like just leave it the way it is. Because if you're allowing dogs off leash all day at Rotolo, you're having it the same thing over at Jason Park. You're not leaving this community here with nothing. No parks for the kids to feel safe. Even though Steve feels different, like there's nothing ever happening. I've lived here over 30 years, and there's a lot that happens here at Jason Park. So to me, giving them 2 parks for off leash for all those hours, we have to go further to enjoy our community, a park in another community than our own community here.
Okay, let me make sure I understand. Are you saying that that's the case if all of Jason is off leash? Or are you saying that's the case if even if the part south of the basketball court is fenced and that's just off leash?
No, one of the parks, to me, just one of the parks, I would prefer to be off leash.
Okay,
It's either Rotolo or it's Jason, but it's got to have, you know, if you're going to keep Jason, it has to have that fence on the south side of the courtyard.
Okay,
You know,
okay.
because it's still fenced up. It's still fenced, and you still have some you know, facilities there for the kids to play and the youth sports, which I feel is very important. But Rotolo is like, that's always been an off leash. I mean, no dogs were allowed there, and I walked there, and there has been some dogs there, but it's like whatever. But to me, to also put this as a dog park, that's not right for this community here at all. I mean, that really disappoints me, because when you look at all these other parks for the dogs, you still have a park that they can go to. And this one here is like, I understand that they love Jason. We all love Jason. But, you know, we're going to have 5 parks. And if we keep Rotolo as an on-leash, that's 6 parks. And where do the kids go? And the families go? And the youth sports go? We have to keep that in mind.
Okay, okay. I've got a lot of hands up. I'm going to go to Jake and Monica and Paul and Kate.
Okay, thanks. So I'm really bad at ad-libbing. I suck at it, so I decided to write some stuff down. So as far as making Rotolo Park unfenced off-leash, first, this goes against the first assumption of the meeting, which says provide separation between off-leash dogs and others using the parks. So I was really surprised and really disappointed to see the Parks and Rec Department recommending something that they know puts children in danger, as we've all been specifically told by Englewood's code enforcement supervisor, who is an expert on animal behavior. It's unfair to hand over one of Englewood's neighborhood parks in an effort to appease an organization whose members mostly hail from outside the city. We know that from their own petitions. If you want to know what the neighbors in the neighborhood want, I looked up the 2017 grant application for county funds, which was matched with city funds, somewhere around $250,000 to improve Rotolo Park. And it referenced many comments and concerns and desires from people in the neighborhood. The comments were all about wanting a safe place for kids and families to gather, with an emphasis on children. The application goes on and on and on about the benefits the upgraded park will bring to children. Nowhere in the grant application did it say anyone asked for Rotolo Park to become an off-leash park. And I looked, I hit Control F and I looked for dog and leash and everything. There's nothing in there about it. And they didn't ask for a playground fence either. So the park has a playground designed for children as young as 2 years, and this idea would deliberately put toddlers and loose dogs in the same space. We know that children have been bitten at Englewood's unfenced off-leash parks. And on top of that, this idea would concentrate all the demonstrated problems with Jason, Duncan, and Centennial parks, which are being undesignated, into a park barely more than 3 acres. And anytime it rains or snows in the field, it will be so soggy that you know the people are going to be up by the playground with their dogs. And we're going to have 3 parks worth crammed in this little space. So we should not be designating any new unfenced off-leash areas, especially at parks that contain facilities for kids. It would be way too jarring of a change for the neighborhood, and it would effectively evict families from the park. We know for a fact that Englewood's unfenced off-leash parks bring in loose dogs from all over the metro area, and Rotolo Park would be overrun. It would spark an explosion in the conflict we're supposedly here to find a solution to. If we need more concessions, like I said earlier, we could talk about fenced areas at Bates, Logan, Romans. Miller is another park in the southwest quadrant of Englewood that has like an unused area in the northeast corner of the park. So there's other options we haven't talked about. And I would just say, if a fully, I'm no hydrological engineer or anything, but if a fully enclosed fenced off-leash area is feasible in the park, I don't know if it is without impeding drainage. I would be okay with that. If you could put a fence in the field, a fully enclosed area, it wouldn't be my favorite thing to see, but I could live with it. But I do think 3 off-leash areas in Southwest Englewood kind of seems like a little much. I mean, you'd have 2 off-leash parks, like Martha was saying, 2 blocks from each other. And almost the most important thing I want to point out, just wrap up with, at the July 20th study session, I went back and I looked, and 6 out of 7 council members specifically said they would support fencing the off-leash areas. I don't know where this idea came from. I was pretty surprised, because I think council has made pretty clear what they want. And anyway, that's what I got. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Let me go to Monica.
We might be a little late in the game for this, but I kind of, just a little contrary to what Martha and Jake are saying, I feel like the more designated fenced in areas at our parks we have, the more you're going to diffuse all traffic, and the less you're going to encourage all those people from outside the metro, outside our little municipality, from coming. And there are lots of spaces like that that would be, I think, big enough to keep fresh grass on, especially Bates Logan, as Jake said. I think we should, I don't think there's anything wrong with looking at this in a more, looking a little further out and saying, this is what our plan is, according to what other cities are doing, what's safest for our kids, encouraging youth sports, making, maybe part of the reason why there's not more picnics in the park is because of the off-leash dogs. I think it's okay to look further out and say, we're going to carve out more and more spaces. Coloradans have dogs, lots of them. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Kind of thinking of it, utilizing more of our spaces and diffusing the problem, so it's not all down at Jason. And yeah.
Great, thank you. Paul.
Yeah, I did have a few thoughts. I wanted to thank Parks and Rec for being willing to add this in. I certainly wasn't expecting to see any new parks being put out there as an option for off-leash parks. I think I do have a couple of concerns about Rotolo. One of them concerns parking. You're going to have if you just have it in that area, you're going to have an awful lot of people trying to park on Huron and Stanford, and I don't know how the neighborhood is going to react to that. Like Monica was talking about. I think diffusing the off-leash areas is a good thing. In that spirit here, I think it would be a lot easier to sell losing as much of Jason Park as we are if we maybe even added the Southwest Greenbelt from Huron to Fox. That's for Steve's benefit. That's the area down and to the right, that sort of linear area that's at the bottom right of that picture. If we added that onto the proposed off-leash area, I think it would be a lot easier to sell. It would definitely make up for a lot of the lost use at Jason, and it would also make up for the lot since the area proposed on this map is the low spot. It is where everything drains at certain times of the spring. After large summer rains, that depression down there will be full of water for a matter of minutes, maybe a couple of hours. And that's good. I think having at least part of the Southwest Greenbelt
This
there
down here.
would help. Exactly. And and that actually runs even further to the southeast. I don't know that it's necessary to add all of the Southwest green belt to it, or I don't know, maybe even consider the Southwest Greenbelt as a substitute for the area shown here. We have the Northwest green belt, which is a long linear area. Maybe something down here that spreads out the dogs, spreads out the parking. I don't believe there are any. There certainly aren't any athletic fields on there. I don't think there are any playground areas on there either, if I'm correct. So that was all I had about Rotolo.
Okay,
Can I add something,
thanks.
Steve?
Sure,
Can I add something?
sure.
Okay, when they're talking about the Southwest Park, there's a trail there, and I take my dog there a lot, and there's a lot of people that take that trail as well. So if you have Rotolo, like they said, yes, when it rains, the bottom of the bowl does get water, and it has flooded. But from what I've heard, is that they have fixed the pipes. And like I said, I've lived here over 30 years, and it's only been flooded twice, where the water ran down towards my house. And so at that particular time, when it rains, no one's going to be there at the bottom of the bowl. And parking, we have to remember that they're going to have 15 hours and they can, and they're not going to, not like Jason, from 6 to 11. So everybody would go there from 6 to 11. They're going to go when it's easier for them, because the hours are going to be more open. As far as the Southwest, that also gets flooded as well, because we've been down this road before. It has been flooded. There are people who walk their dogs, and a lot of elderly, I must say, walk their dogs down this trail, because this trail continues all the way up to, I can't remember what street it is, but up by Clayton School. So a lot of people walk that trail. So you would be taking those people, those people will have to find another path for them to walk their dogs. So it's like, as far as Rotolo, they can just put like just one fence on top of the bowl. That would be sufficient. But again, it's that thing where these two parks, it takes maybe not even 5 minutes to walk from Jason Park to Rotolo Park. So that is, to me, that is just way too close for this community to have two dog parks so close together. And K9, it takes maybe 8 minutes to walk.
Okay. Let me go to Kate.
that in
Kate,
charge.
let me go to Kate. You've been patient. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Then I'll go over to Dave.
Thanks. So I personally feel very strongly that this is not something that we should do. My biggest concern is even just from this discussion, right? Like, how many people feel strongly about this? So Rotolo Park was never discussed in the original recommendations. It was never brought up. My concern is that by doing something to this park, we will start having a ton of people showing up at commission meetings saying they don't want it, they want this, who knows. But I just feel like we shouldn't introduce something that's not already in the conversation, because I think that will put us right back here 6 months later. So I vote no on this one. The other thing I would like to bring up is the fact that we decided to make Emerson off leash because we did have requests from the neighborhood and the community. We have not heard any requests about this at all. So it's one of those things, again, where like, I don't think we should put it out there. I think that's going to be not good. I think it was Paul who said like the neighborhood's reaction, not so great. Other question I had is with like the draining, if this was off leash dog and the flood water, if the field is dirty, if poop's not being picked up, what about the sanitation aspect? Is that not something that we should be concerned about?
Okay, Dave.
The reason that this park was chosen, and it was somewhat of a compromise, because there is a large area, as Steve had mentioned, that has been lost at Jason, we felt that this was somewhat of a compromise to give the dog owners some other place. Number one, we would remove the sports field down there and give that up. And when we have one of these areas closed, Jason's one of the heaviest utilized dog parks. So if we have to close that for regular maintenance for an extended period of time, like we had talked 3-4 weeks, this gives the dog owners another place to go that is very close by to continue to utilize. And then just like that, if we need to close Rotolo for any reason, then Jason is there as an opportunity. So that's why we had chosen this as an option.
So let me stay on for just a second, Dave. Let me ask a couple of questions. One of them was about the whole sanitary piece and floods. Is that, I'm hearing on one hand that it doesn't flood very often. I'm hearing on the other hand that, you know, it still is a retention pond. What are there concerns about that, or do we need to think about that?
It's probably something that we can consider, but
Mhm.
it is not where the city's water intake is down along the Platte. So it becomes less of a problem. As that water reaches the Platte, it is then diluted. So I don't think you're going to get a lot of kickback from any of the authorities on waste
Okay.
for that reason. Yes, it does flood. I can still count probably on both hands, and I've been here for 35 years, the number of times that it has been completely flooded. So it depends. Our weather is getting warmer. We're not getting the storms we used to. It will still flood occasionally, but I don't think it's with the frequency that it has in the past.
Okay. Another question, I've heard several folks say that Rotolo might be something that we could reach in a compromise if there was a way to get a fence through and ensure that there was, you know, clear separation with the side that families and kids are going to use. Is
On
that
on that
possible?
end
Or
of things, we potentially could put a fence up on top of the berm along Huron and what's the other street over there?
Stanford?
Stanford. Up along the top
Okay.
edges outside the flooded area. So yes, there is a potential there.
Okay, okay, good to know. I'm not suggesting that any of these are answers or responses, but it's good additional information.
Can I ask
Dave?
Dave a question?
Yeah,
Dave? Is he still
Go
there?
ahead.
yeah,
Yes.
Dave's here.
Yes, when you were talking about Rotolo, that you guys came up with Rotolo, so when you are cleaning Jason Park or you have to do some kind of maintenance on it, they can go to Rotolo Park. Now, what's the difference between them going to Cushion Park or Emerson Park when you go to do their maintenance? What close park are they going to go to? Because you're
don't
going to
have-
have all these parks, but Jason and Rotolo, like as I mentioned, are just too close. They're within walking distance, 5 minutes. So what is the difference between the other parks? Where are they going to go?
The difference is that Jason is the most heavily utilized dog park. And that was what the thinking is. If we have to close some of those other dog parks, yes, they will have to travel a little bit further to find another area that is open. That's correct.
And if
Again-
once you open up Cushion Park, then a lot of people will be going to Cushion Park as well. So it's not going to be so heavy with a lot of dogs, because a lot of people from Denver it'll be closer for them, and they may start going to Cushion Park instead of to Jason Park.
Well, all I can say is we don't know any of that just yet until the use starts to accumulate in all of these parks.
Mhm.
And again, I'm hoping we can reach something that works. So Jake, you got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. So to reply to what Monica said, either I may have misunderstood what she said, or I think maybe she misunderstood what I said. If I did correctly understand her, I would agree that I think lots of fence areas diffusing the thing around the city, I think is a great idea. I think that's fine. And that's something I'm willing to give is some of these areas in parks where I played as a kid. I'm willing to see them fenced off to contain the off-leash thing. So as far as what Dave was saying, Rotolo Park is just way too big of a give, especially because, like I said, we have that survey from 2017, the grant application, where we did get, like, actually I think I saw Dave's name on it, where we kind of know what the neighbors want, and they didn't want this. Nobody mentioned it, at least in the grant application. And so if we turn Rotolo and Jason into a big giant dog park complex, then to Martha's point, where are people like me to go? Because I take my kids there all the time, and my kids have friends there that we run into all the time. There's an existing community there of parents and stuff, and where are we to go? I would also point out that if our dog park system, I think some of that idea is behind, like, imagining the current number of dogs at the parks needing to be shuffled around as we clean up the parks. But if our dog park system is not so exceptional and so aberrant, I don't think we're going to see nearly as many visitors from outside the city, because Denver has dog parks and Littleton might, I'm not really sure. But I just don't think we need to envision, if we have fenced areas and we don't have these really aberrant, unusual dog parks, I just don't think we're going to get people coming from all over the metro area. And as far as the fence, I have personally seen the park flood multiple times. I was there actually in 2018 when that huge hailstorm came and killed the lady on Bannock. I was there with my 2-week-old daughter, and the three of us, we had to huddle under the picnic shelter. That's a whole other story. Anyway, the point is, it flooded, and across that berm became a river down into the cul-de-sac, and that does happen once. I've seen it at least a couple times. So I think if a fence goes on the berm, it's going to collect a bunch of debris and impede the flow. And Englewood already has so many problems with drainage, storm drainage. Again, I'm no engineer, but I would think if there was a fence, it would basically have to be at that lowest elevation in the bowl. If you imagine the bowl kind of filling up, I would imagine the fence would have to be like a rectangle in there. That's the only way that there isn't going to be this force of water collecting sticks and leaves and pushing the fence over.
So I'm going to make, Jake, I'm going to make a note. We don't need to design the fence tonight, but
Okay.
I heard clearly that there does need to be, if this is an option, there does
Okay.
need to be clear separation between the off leash and the playground.
Okay, and real quick, just one last thing. As far as the Southwest Greenbelt, like Martha said, there's a path going through there. People are going to have to go around on Stanford. I take my daughter there all the time. I learned to ride a bike there. I don't think it's comparable to Emerson, because Emerson is just a rectangle of grass. This has a path going through it, other uses and stuff. Thank you.
Sure, no problem. I have 10 minutes left. We've gotten through 6 of the suggested off-leash parks, some of them completely, most of them with fenced areas in them. At least in 2 parks, one I have the off-leash proponents frustrated because they would lose additional space that they currently have. And in another park, I also have neighbors frustrated that that's an area they're used to using, and they feel like they would lose some of the space that they would have. So part of that feels like that's how we get to a compromise in one way or the other. I've heard a couple of you mention 2 parks, Bates Logan and Romans, as maybe alternatives. I don't know anything about that, but that is at least on my list to come back and ask Dave and Christina about. How do you want to use the 10 minutes that we've got left? We talked about licensing issues, enforcement issues, and how do we communicate to the larger group prior to this going to council, kind of what our rationale was and how we're thinking about moving forward with it. So Christina, maybe I'm coming back to you and wondering, do I try to put together a summary of what I think I heard, and then do we try to schedule another meeting where we review the summary and we talk about licensing, enforcement, and communication?
I would not be opposed to doing that. I want to, understand this is everybody's time in the evenings with your families. So I guess from the committee here, if anybody's opposed to having one more meeting to review what Steve puts together and kind of finalize the licensing program, if we want to move forward with that or not, and how we move forward with communicating what we come up with. I know there's been a request if we were to agree to move forward with Rotolo or even the Southwest Greenbelt, we'll definitely want to do a community meeting and outreach to them so they have feedback. Just as we will with Emerson, we'll check in with them again. So yeah, I would want to check in with this committee and see if everybody's willing to do maybe one more hour-long meeting and finalize everything and at least get to a point where most of us are comfortable moving forward with the proposal.
Okay. Stay close by. Paul's got his hand up.
I just had I know this came up right at the end of the last meeting, and since we're on it now, I wanted to make this point too. When we broached the topic of licensing with Parks and Rec, and when we've been talking about it, I think as the off-leash community, we've actually been talking about it as licensing, not general dog licenses, but actually licensing for off-leash use. Like it would be a thing where, and this was prior to talking about having fenced in areas and having dogs segregated from everybody else. So this may be moot at this point, but that was more of a discussion where, you know, the license would be a license to have your dog off leash in the park, rather than just having dogs licensed or not licensed. So, and I feel like it's kind of gotten a little skewed away from that, and it's trending towards just the topic of general licensing, and that's not where it's at least with us, that's not where it started.
Okay, and I don't want to solve the licensing issue tonight, but Mark, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I simply wanted to agree with Paul that has always been my understanding of the main thrust of the licensing idea. You know, there's already requirements for certain types of tags for rabies and things like that for dogs generally in the city. And I thought it was to kind of create a community of folks that wanted to use off-leash facilities of various kinds and have a licensing program for that use that creates a little revenue stream that goes back into the from the users. That's been my understanding. I know we've probably been, you know, we've probably gone back and forth a little bit.
I'm okay not making this any more complicated than we have to. So Kate, you're on mute.
I was going to say that I completely agree with Mark that it should be about the dog owner taking their dog to the park and not about like the dog being licensing, which is why I was going to say that I think that doing a licensing for the Englewood resident or the Denver resident that their dog can be in the park is good. And it could be like an educational class that they have to attend to understand the rules of the park and things like that.
Okay, Dave or David.
I just wanted to clarify what Mark said. We currently have no dog or pet licensing in the city of Englewood.
Okay, well, we're going to come back and we're going to visit licensing. There's a couple of questions rolling around there, and so we'll come back and revisit that.
Steve, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, I just saw your hand. Sorry about that. Thanks for jumping in.
Okay, well, at some point in time, I know there's like 10 minutes left. There was a couple things I wanted to say.
Well, I've got 5 minutes left, so there's probably not a better time than now. So you probably should jump in and say them. Well,
my 2 cents, I think a lot of the off-leash users, in terms of the licensing, was to throw some cash toward the city, maybe to offset the revenue in terms of pirate youth sports, you know, if there's a conflict with that type of thing. You know, in terms of our original assumptions, you know, we're assuming there's problems, but it's all anecdotal, and I think we undermine our credibility when we don't have evidence other than, you know, well, if people don't report things, it's just hearsay. And I'm not saying that it's, you know, they didn't happen, but it's just not there. It's not documented evidence. And, you know, in terms of the proximity of Rotolo and Jason, what the arguments I'm hearing are, well, somewhat confusing, but you know, the parks are too close, therefore we can't do it. Well, what's the assumptions that say that we have too much? There's no assumption that that's a problem. Just proximity shouldn't be a reason to not do it. And if Rotolo wasn't on the task force previous, you know, if it wasn't on the radar, it doesn't make sense to say it can't be on the radar now. And also, you know, just, you know, the people in the neighborhood, they just don't know because this is kind of a new idea. It would be something that would need to be shared for sure. I don't know. I think, again, I think a lot of what we're doing is based on some assumptions that aren't really material. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to try to set up another 1 hour meeting. And I think if we do that, Christina, if we do that in 2 weeks, does that still keep us within a reasonable time frame?
Yeah, I mean, if next week may even work too, to if everybody's up for it and wants to just meet next week. Steve, that's on you too, if you have the time.
Yeah, I'll look at my calendar, but I can't right now because my screen is shared and something will break if I do this, I'm sure.
Hey,
Is
Steve,
anybody opposed to meeting next week?
2 weeks from now is election day, probably not
Oh,
the
we
best
don't,
day.
we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I'll figure out a time. I don't know that it necessarily has to be Tuesday unless that's something that's within you guys from the city perspective. But my thought about 2 weeks is I think we've got some work to do between now and then to get as close as we can to what we think we're comfortable moving forward with. And I know that, you know, there's gonna be some push and shove on that compromise piece, and that's going to take a little bit of time to do. And so that was my thought for 2 weeks out, whether it's sometime of that week, whether it's the Wednesday or Thursday after election even, I don't know. So does that work okay for everybody if we kind of leave it a little bit up in the air? Okay. I can't see everybody's head nodding. If that doesn't work for you, you've got my email and my phone number. Please let me know as soon as you can. I will work at putting together a rough draft of kind of what I think we agreed to, and then areas where I think we're still not quite in agreement, and we'll go from there. Any last words that we need to say before we jump off?
I have a quick comment.
Sure.
This is Lindsay with Parks and Rec. I know at one point Miller was suggested in that northeastern corner over there. Our concern is foul balls from baseball, and that's a lot of spectator seating. So just safety of everybody, really. It was our concern there. And then Bates Logan, there are a few little pocket areas that have that potential to be fenced in. However, they go directly up to people's houses, directly up to their backyards. So, or it's directly on the street, which was in between two houses as well. So just out of, respect for the neighbors that are right there as well, we didn't like Bates Logan as another option just for the neighbors that are there. And it's also a multi-use field, shelter, and playground as well. So just a little feedback on those, or thoughts or ideas on those areas as well.
And I've got a couple minutes, or 1 minute. So Monica, you'll have to be quick.
Oh, I was just gonna say, wouldn't it be nice if instead of having people flocking to our city because there's no rules and they can let their dog run wild, what if we could boast that we have a community with so many wonderful, safe dog parks in every neighborhood that people would want to buy a house and live here, for that, like a best kept secret kind of thing.
Fair enough. Steve, it looks like you're talking, but you're on mute.
I was just going to say, we already have that wonderful feature. We have safe parks and people flock to us, but I would say most of the people that are at the dog parks are Englewood residents. Yes, others come in, but they're not the majority. And I think Jason Park, and maybe someone, with the city could answer to this, but my conjecture is that the population center of Englewood, wherever that central point is pretty close to Jason Park.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thanks. Jake, I see your hand up. You're going to have to be very quick.
Yeah, very quick. Just I personally, just all this talk about there's no the parks are safe and stuff. I'm not going to take my my toddler and my baby to a park where, as the code enforcement supervisor said, loose dogs are going to see him and her as a squeaky toy.
I understand that. We have an ongoing debate about that, and we're not going to get that solved tonight. So I appreciate everybody's time. We'll get together for an hour in probably the next 10 days to 2 weeks. I'll work that out. I will send you probably a doodle poll or something like that to make sure that all of you will be able to participate and no one will be left out. I also will send out some emails between here and there looking just for ways to sort of move this process forward. Some of you I hear back from on emails, some of you I don't. So please don't be at all shy or bashful getting back in touch with me. You've got a number of ways to do that. So thanks a lot. Appreciate you sharing the evening with us. We'll be back in touch. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye. Have a good night.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks.